Murderous Heart Live. I wanted to give the Vallows ample opportunity to get their messaging out. If you haven't heard, welcome. And the big news is, of course, Lori Vallow was found guilty of conspiracy to commit first-degree murder in the death of her fourth husband, Charles Vallow. So I am so happy for the Vallow family, just for them to be able to get this justice. I'm glad I could be there. I'm pretty tired. I'm not going to stay live that long because I've been up at 3 for the last 3 mornings in a row. I think the last 2 or 3 days I was like the first non-media person to get to the courthouse. It was also really nice just to be able to like sit with my friends, and yeah, it was a really good experience. Not that this is about me at all. Obviously we went live almost every day. We didn't go live yesterday, but yeah. So yeah, I just think and I haven't seen any of the interviews with the jurors, but I heard from someone else that it was the text messages that really did it for at least one of them, and I felt the same way. It was just it was a little, I wouldn't even say nerve-wracking, but we got to the last day and it was like, okay, this is conspiracy. And then, Trina just really brought the goods. Detective Duncan did an outstanding job. In my opinion, I think it was probably Adams and Detective Duncan's testimonies that probably packed the most punch. But yeah, it's just a good day. I love how at the end she's like, no, I don't want to know the sentencing. Let's just get through Brandon's trial. I've had a few questions about if I'm going to attend Brandon's trial. I am like just so behind this, but yeah, and I really hope that there will be justice for Brandon. I'd be a lot happier if Melanie were also, awaiting trial, because I think she should absolutely have been charged. But I do hope that Brandon gets the justice he deserves. I won't be at the trial. Like, at this point, I am going to turn my focus to, finishing up this app and then just being able to search across now the 3 trials, because there are themes that have been consistent across the 3 trials. There's evidence that's been consistent across the 3 trials. And so behind the scenes, I've been working on like incorporating AI so that you can search for a term like, for example, fight, and also choose the option to include related terms like conflict and things like that, but also building custom dictionaries. So right now, as it stands, if you search for zombie, it will also return results for dark spirit, evil spirit, and then all of the zombie names. So for Tylee, it was Hillary, Elroy for JJ, Rhonda for Kay, of course, Eblos, Garrett, and Ned for Charles. The only thing though is that it also includes Garrett Smith. So what am I to do? They're even spelled the same. But anyway, so that's going to be my focus. But yeah, but then as Brandon's trial comes up, then I will just continue to use the live blogging from Nate Eaton's. I mean, he's just done a fantastic job with the live blogging. But then also Garna Mejia, like, she's not just an amazing reporter. She's like a dear friend. She's working on like ordering copies of some of the court filings from Idaho and Arizona. It would be nice to also incorporate them into the app, but at minimum, it will be like the trial coverage. But yeah, it's a good day. I really see, just having sat through this trial, like I really see where like the criminal science needs a lot more data science, and that's not like a criticism. It's amazing what these agencies have been able to do with manual effort, but I really see just where one day we will be relying so much more on data. Imagine if they would have put everything, like, even, well, let me back up a little bit. So at one point in the trial, so this is an example of like a peek behind the curtain when I hear different things being argued. So one of the detectives was talking about how, when they pulled up someone's cell records in Cellbrite, that it was hard to be able to like make connections because they would have to log out or, like close out of one person's Cellbrite records and then open up someone else's Cellbrite records. And then it was like, like trying to manually sync these things up. And in my mind, I was like, again, not a criticism, but I was like, alternatively, you could export all of this, store it in a database, and be able to search across all of those records, and that's where it's going, so corporate, typically, because corporate has a lot more money, they adopt technology at a much faster speed, but I do see where data science will play, a more critical role in getting victims justice. So anyway, so that's going to be my focus. Is more like for people who are reporting on these cases, people who are following the cases. So I'm really focused on making it mobile friendly because I know most of you are on mobile devices, uh, where like I do most everything on desktop, either a laptop or an iMac. Most people following the case are on mobile devices, so I'm developing the app with that in mind. But yeah, so I think just for people who will be doing documentaries, who will be researching more of these cases, I think the app will be helpful for people to see like just some of these patterns, and even just in testing the app, it's I've done searches and I've been like, whoa, I didn't know about this text exchange, and so I will be covering more of those things, especially when I finish developing and can really just start focusing more on researching. But anyway, having said that, I'm going to open it up to questions, and yeah, let's just talk about the trial. If you have any questions, I'll also be monitoring Facebook, if any of my mods see questions and want to add them there. Oh, I also met wonderful, wonderful people who have been following the case. Like one of them was a woman who, I kept talking about how, like, I did this one live where I retraced Lori's steps, using like the GPS data and location data, not just GPS, but location data that I found in the Chandler police report. And after that live, someone had said, oh, yeah, that medical complex they stopped at before going back to the house for Alex to do his walkthrough, is the same medical complex that Summer's husband works at. So he's a chiropractor, and his office is in that complex. And it was still under development in 2019. So yeah, so and I mentioned this in a couple other lives. Janice and I retraced those steps that Lori, um, just her erratic movements on the day that Charles was shot, and we did stop by that medical complex, and I was like, "Yep, dumpster, dumpster." Um, but yeah, so I'm pretty sure. It I'm pretty sure that because they had been hanging out at Alex's house, I think they thought that Chandler police would come and search his house, and they were just dumping stuff. But uh, yeah. Anyway. Oh, but where I was going with that, sorry, I'm so tired. The woman who had made that comment, letting me know that that's where Summer's husband's office was at the trial, and I got to meet her, and I was like, oh my gosh, it's nice to be able to like put that insight, to a face, because I've referenced it multiple times. But yeah, so I just met a lot of really wonderful people who like have been following this case, many of them, from the beginning, because this case obviously had its genesis in Arizona. Yes, Karen. Yes, Z's is included. It's zombies, dark spirits, evil spirits, Z's. Um, yeah, and then all of their names, and then even just like custom custom dictionaries for things like, Tammy could be referenced as Tammy or Tamara, and JJ as JJ, or Joshua, and then JJ sometimes has the periods in between, but thank you, Clar. I think that's how you pronounce your name. Not sure. Uh, yeah, I probably should have thrown a filter on. Yeah, Janice, it is. It's yeah, and like the focus for me today, like this is the Vallows day. I have read a lot of comments about, like, justice for Joe, and one of the things that I just have focused on throughout this trial, throughout all of the trials, especially once she had, those guilty verdicts out of Idaho, because the reality is she's never leaving Idaho. She has 3 life sentences. She most likely will die in prison in Idaho. So like all of and it's not to minimize justice for Charles. I'm so glad that there's justice for Charles. But the thing that steadies me is just knowing, whether Joe ever gets justice or not. all of the victims get justice, because these people will. I just don't think that Lori or Chad will ever spend a day outside of prison or jail. And apparently, prison is, quote, a million, or was it a million or 1,000 times? I think it was 1,000 times better than Arizona jail. So I was like, oh, boo-hoo. Keep her in Arizona jail. And yeah, it was interesting watching her. I think she was braced for it. She was, pretty unemotional. Probably just holding it in until she got back to jail. Uh, but I noticed, like, even in waiting, she was talking to her paralegal, and you could, it just looked like she was just trying to savor, every minute she could, as, someone in like regular civilian clothes, pretty clothes, outside of an orange, jail uniform. But yeah, and today, Janice and I had an extended conversation with one of the bailiffs, who was great. He was just, yeah, he was such a nice guy, and yeah. So he was telling us about how, like, uh, they were keeping Lori in. There's a jail below the courthouse, and that's where they were keeping her, like, like on the breaks and stuff like that. But yeah, it it was just, I can't even remember everything he told us, but yeah, it was just interesting. I mean, I think just hearing any kind of like behind the scenes reporting of, like, what life is like for Lori when she got out of the courtroom. Uh, but I'm, I'm glad that, like, I expressed some concern on the first couple days. I felt like there was, some playing to the crowd, and I was just concerned, like, just don't give them grounds for appeal. And even though I think that there are grounds for appeal, just because, like, by the time they turned over the raw data, I think there was like one or two more days of the trial left. So, that could be problematic. And then the issue with Detective Coons, them not submitting his qualifications and things like that. But I'm not sure that she will appeal, because she already is here through most likely the end of June, and possibly later, because of the, well, yeah, I think Brandon's trial is scheduled to start, it was like the first week in June, and could go through the first week in July. I don't think it's going to go that long, because I imagine that will probably be even shorter than this trial was. But then, there will be the sentencing and stuff. But if she appeals, then that means she has to come back to Arizona, which she didn't like the jail. So it'll be interesting to see if she does, and if she does, if, next time she'll actually use a lawyer. That would be her best bet. I think she got in some good shots, especially like in her closing statement. She was definitely able to show, like, she was able to poke holes in the investigation. What she wasn't able to poke holes in were her own text messages. Like, the text message, they must have been Ned before we got rid of him. Like, I mean, the prosecution probably could have rested with that. But yeah, uh, so it'll be interesting to see just like what they have for the Brandon trial, because there wasn't a lot in the Gilbert police report. All right, let's see if there are any questions. If there are not, we will call it a night. Couldn't she have pled guilty if she wanted to get out of Arizona so fast? I'm sure the state would have been thrilled with that. Yeah. Thanks, Jennifer. Yeah, she could have. And who knows, she might with Brandon just to be able to get out. But, you know, Lori, obviously, it goes without saying, but I'll say it anyway. Lori's very arrogant. Yeah. And so I think she genuinely thought that she could do better. One thing that did concern me, and I talked about this in one of the lives, she didn't play any of the evidence that she actually had. So I did wonder if she just decided, and she may have, been counseled to do this by her advisory council, to not use any of it to help make the case for, hey, you know what, we were entitled to, not all of it, because the state is entitled to withhold evidence that could violate other people's privacy, intimate text messages, things like that are just aren't pertinent. But she would then be entitled to a hearing where they could go through that evidence that's withheld, if there's like contention over it. And so I did wonder if she had just made a decision like, I'm not using any of the evidence that I have, and decided, you know what, I'm just going to let the state move forward with their case and learn their whole strategy. And then when we actually get the full data file that they were entitled to by the rules of discovery, and like, if she does decide to appeal and the appeal is granted, she basically has the state's strategy. And with the witnesses, now she can be prepared. Like, she knows what Christina said, she knows what Serena said, she like all of these different witnesses, even with Nancy Joe saying, if the state had asked for my phone records, I would have gladly handed them over. And I wanted to be like, don't say that, but so it could be that was her defense strategy. We just don't know, because she's I think she's psychopathic, but also I just do not think she is very intelligent. I think she did a good job in her closing, except for like the cheap shots. But I think she did get under Trina's skin, which I think she took some pleasure in that. And but yeah, so it's just so hard to know, like, with her, because she's unpredictable. So, but if she does plan to appeal, she could just hold it together and not have to have like a mental evaluation, and really push her speedy trial rights. And in this time, and now she has access to the data, and she could just start preparing her strategy for an appeal. We just don't know. Or she could just be like, I want to go back to Idaho and never step foot in Arizona again. I mean, if she thought she had nothing to lose, I kind of agreed with her. Like, because I think she knows she's never leaving Idaho. So coming here and, playing attorney, neither of these are capital cases. And so, yeah, so I just think she just figured, hey, I'll get some publicity and have some fun. That, who knows, she's nearly impossible to predict. Okay. All right, I'll see if there. Oh, yeah. Jules J said, I still don't understand. If they interviewed Alex and did a background check, they would have found out he went to jail for assaulting Joe. How did they not make him, automatic suspect in Charles? One thing that was, I used the term interesting for lack of a better term. But when Charles reached out to Gilbert police in January, he was locked out of his home. He was scared out of his mind. And they asked for his ID, and one of them went back to the patrol car. And they were obviously running a background check on him. And so, here you had Charles, and I understand that, like, they don't know what's going on, so I don't fault them for running a background check. What I do fault them for is that there was no evidence that happened with Alex. So here you have a man who just shot another man, and they didn't even search him. Like, he did walk out with his hands up, but like, it wasn't until they put him in the car, they were getting ready to, put him in the car and take him to the station to question him, that he, like, put up his hands, like, I guess you probably want to search me. And they kind of joked about it. Like, I forget what they said, but it was like, I guess we should, do that or something. But I was just like, wow, here you have a man who was a victim. But, I just think that they were, like, very suspicious. Like, yeah, this, this strong guy, how is he being victimized by, a woman? And they were very dismissive of him and very helpful to Lori, and a patrol officer even giving her, I think it was like 7 or 8 tips on how to evade a mandatory pickup. And but anyway, so but then, here was Alex, and yeah, and yeah, so I already talked about, like, also, the whacked out evidence. Like, they did not win this case on the evidence in the room. Like, there's just no way. Like, I will forever say, like, that crime scene made absolutely no sense. The testimony about it made no sense. And even, like, there was one, I can't think of his name, but he was really, really interesting. He was an expert witness about firearms, and it was a fascinating testimony. But, like, they just danced all around the round that was chilling in the middle of the room, which made absolutely no sense. Or the placement of the shell casings made no sense, but like, he confirmed that the shell casings had indeed come out of that gun. They were consistent with Alex's gun. He even talked about how, like, when a bullet is ejected, it has like etchings, from the, what is it, the barrel or something. And I was like, okay. And so the bullet chilling in the middle of the floor that supposedly went up the left side of Charles' body and then hung a sharp right, when it came out of his shoulder and had like no blood trail or anything like that, and there just wasn't any testimony about it. Like, I think all we heard about it was that Detective Coons said that there was some deformation, like that usually like the back of it is round and it was oval. That was it. But and they asked, like, did you, or Lori asked, did you test that bullet against, like the scarring and the wood floor? No, no. But anyway, so yeah, it was. He absolutely should. He should have been arrested that day. And I'm not just saying that because of what we now know in retrospect. This isn't a case of woulda, coulda, shoulda. Like, one of their main claims was that